On the news, fresh Supreme Court judgment casts doubt on PDP's petition against President Muhammadu Buhari's victory. After 2 weeks of manhunt, police arrest suspected kidnapped kingpin Hamisu Wadume. And Human Rights Watch slammed fresh torture allegations against Cameroonian government. Hello and welcome to News Now. I am Fidelia Aguncha. Presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the 2019 general elections, Atiku Abubakar, has been denied permission to inspect the server of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. In a unanimous judgment by a 5-man panel of the Supreme Court, the appeal was dismissed on the ground that Atiku and the PDP failed to provide sufficient reasons why the application should be granted. The court had earlier on struck out an appeal filed by the PDP and Atiku seeking to nullify a ruling of the Presidential Election Petitions Court. Now, the tribunal had ruled that the PDP did not give a reply to an application filed on May 14, 2019 by the All Progressives Congress APC seeking, among other reliefs, the dismissal of their petition challenging President Buhari's victory at the 2019 poll. A 5-man panel led by Justice Datijo Mohammed therefore struck out the appeal for having become statute barred. The development is coming a day ahead of the final judgment of the Presidential Tribunal. Wanted kidnapped kingpin Hamisu Wadume has been rearrested by the Nigeria Police Force. Wadume was nabbed at a hideout in Kano State by operatives of the Inspector General of Police IGP's Intelligence Response Team. He is presently being held at the force headquarters in Abuja. Wadume was initially arrested in Taraba State before he was reportedly set free by some soldiers who mistook him for a kidnapped victim. Confirming his rearrest, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, thanked the public for their support, pledging that Wadume's arrest will help solve the mystery surrounding the killing of the police operatives in Taraba State. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, says former Lagos State Governor Akinwumi Ambode is currently under investigation by the Commission. Spokesperson for the EFCC, Tony Orilade, announced this in a statement released earlier today. Orilade, however, denied reports that the Commission raided the Ekpe residence of the former governor. Reacting to this, Ambode revealed that the EFCC is yet to open any direct communication with him on any issue. He, however, said he is ready and willing to respond if or when they do so. Last month, 2 bank accounts linked to the former governor was frozen by the EFCC over alleged fraud to the tune of 9.9 billion naira. Meanwhile, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has restrained the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, from seizing assets and properties belonging to former governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari. The court also restrained the Attorney General of the Federation from interfering in the matter. Justice Taiwo gave the order while ruling on an ex parte motion for interim injunction argued by Yari's lawyer Mahmoud Magaji. According to the judge, the order was given to prevent the agency and the AGF from interfering with Yari's fundamental human right. Justice Taiwo equally directed parties in the case to maintain status quo pending the hearing and determination of the substantive suit fixed for the 6th of September 2019. The judge, however, said the orders relate only to the properties of the ex-governor and not his account frozen on the order of the court. Well, let's now talk state affairs. The Kogi State House of Assembly has directed the Chief Judge in the state, Justice Nasiru Ajena, to set up a 7-man committee to proceed with the impeachment of the Deputy Governor, Simon Achuba. The lawmakers gave the directive during Tuesday's plenary. Now, this followed a motion raised by the majority leader of the House, Abdullahi Bello, who cited Section 188, subsection 4 of the Nigerian Constitution as amended. Bello explained that he raised the motion following the allegation of gross misconduct leveled against the deputy governor by the House. He said the failure of Achuba to respond to the allegations within the 14 days given by law warranted no further debate, but for the next steps to be taken. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, has charged state houses of assembly to save local government area system from imminent collapse through its instruments of lawmaking. Gbajabiamila made the call at a roundtable with speakers of state houses of assembly in Lagos on Tuesday. Adesha Odushoga now reports.
Barely a year after President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Constitution 4th Alteration Bill, allowing state judiciary and House of Assembly to directly access funds to their credit, it suffered setback at the State Assembly. This is the reason for this gathering. The National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies have organized this one-day roundtable for a joint collaboration between the local government and the National Assembly.
Our institute is the capacity building hub for Nigerian parliamentarians. And we observe that before now, our capacity, the training aspect has been centered on National Assembly. This time around, we have so many challenges at the state level. Challenges bordering on security, bordering on unemployment, bordering on insurgency, and a whole lot. If our legislature are not well trained, if they are not well equipped, if they are lacking in capacity on how to make law, on most of these fundamental issues, we won't be able to realize any good governance in Nigeria.
With the theme strengthening the capacity of state legislature for effective governance, the speakers are asking relevant stakeholders to intensify their effort towards effective implementation of the constitutional provision.
What we are actually appealing for is for stakeholders, that's the governor, the judiciary, the legislature, to come to a round table without necessarily allowing Mr. President to invoke any executive order in implementing this constitutional provision. The practice we have right now is we are all acting, most of the Houses of Assembly, they are acting in violation of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So, and it is also not correct to say that any House of Assembly is autonomous without the present provision signed by Mr. President.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, who was represented by Idris Wase, the Deputy Speaker, assures that the local government will not be undermined.
Over time, there have been agitations from both the unions of local governments, Nigerian populace, asking for the complete autonomy of local governments in Nigeria. And if you recall, during the 8th Assembly, we did pass that bill, but unfortunately it suffered a setback at the State Assembly. That's why we're asking for this collaboration, so that collectively we can jointly resolve to give Nigerians what they want. I believe whoever that wants genuine development for this country, local government should have their funds. The executive order has already been passed, and you are aware that NFIU implementing that and pursuing that, and we are with them in tandem.
President Buhari had inaugurated a 16-member panel presidential implementation committee to fashion out a workable national strategy for the implementation of the policy to ensure that funds appropriated to these two tiers of government at the state level are released to them directly. Adesha Odushoga, TV360, Lagos.
And in Benue State, the Security Council has suspended 3 traditional rulers for their various roles in a crisis that led to the death of 9 people in the state. In that state, now the affected rulers include the district head of Mbacha, Luke Atomigba, who was suspended for allegedly inciting and sponsoring the crisis, while the third-class chiefs of Chongo and Ikbusu were suspended for alleged negligence and pursuit of clannish interest and fueling the crisis. They were suspended after a meeting between the members of the Security Council and the state governor, Samuel Orcham. The incident occurred in the early hours of Saturday during a burial ceremony in Katsina Ala local government area of the state. Civil society organization CISLAC has created a channel for citizens to report instances of corrupt practices. The group announced this at a one-day sensitization and awareness campaign on the new initiative in Abuja. It is called the Advocacy and Legal Advice Center, ALAC. The center would be a confidential avenue for victims and witnesses of corruption to report unethical activities.
Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center has set up the ALAC, which is the Advocacy and Legal Advice Center. It is not only in terms of maybe you want to have contract. Even when you are looking for a job and you see that something is fishy, you can have a report. But a lot of things happened. But because we don't know where to report to, we are permanently a victim and we are kept quiet. We are being made to keep quiet over the matters. But when you know where to report to, that of course, that report is not only going to be confidential, it will be followed to a logical conclusion. I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will be willing to do so.
If you don't address lawyers that stand here pro bono for free, nothing will happen. Change doesn't usually come from the top, it usually comes from the bottom, and it is actually you. The second message I would like to make is make yourself heard. When you make your first complaint, nothing happens, then make a second. Just find ways to get heard, that that you make noise. Because if you just give up, if you don't follow up your case, then again nothing happens. I can tell you that even if you live in Europe, in US, it is really difficult to get justice sometimes. But if you persist and if you follow up your case, there is a high chance. So please don't get pessimistic and use the opportunities that are here for you.
When you meet a policeman that maltreats you, it is not because he is a policeman. It is because he is corrupted as a person. Because if you look at corrupt officers, you will not find space in your heart to consider those who are fighting day and night to do what is right. The essence of this interaction today is for us to tell us that the police, in the light of the challenges that we have coming from some of our officers who allow themselves to exhibit their selfishness while putting on the uniform.
You're still watching news now. We'll take a break here and return shortly. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's now cross over to Oyin Adekunle for the latest in business. Hello, Oyin.
Hi, Fidelia.
The floor is yours. Tell us what's the latest.
Well, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, says President Muhammadu Buhari's order to restrict forex for food importation is in line with the Apex Bank's policies to grow the economy. Emefiele said this on the sidelines of the two-day presidential retreat in Abuja. Fidelia Goncha tells us more.
One of the first directives issued by President Muhammadu Buhari during his first term in office was a ban on the importation of rice, Nigeria's most consumed staple food. Just months into his second tenure, the president has now ordered the central bank to stop providing forex for food importers. Expressing support for the president's directive, the governor of the Apex Bank explains the benefits of the ban and how the CBN plans to implement it.
Basically, the issue is that we're saying that if we have an item or a food
product that can be produced in the country, why should we, I use the word, waste scarce foreign exchange to be importing those items in the country when those can be produced in the country? The issue here is that it's important for me to say that the attempt to misrepresent the comments of Mr. President is very unfair and unfortunate. But what we will say from the Central Bank of Nigeria is that this president has made this speech or made this comment purely to strengthen the position of the Central Bank of Nigeria. To say, yes, he believes in what the Central Bank of Nigeria has been doing since 2016, and that there is a need for us to reinforce that going forward. And I would say that, to be honest, we would aggressively go more into the list of items that are being imported into the country and that we think can be produced in Nigeria. And we would, and I would like to stress that we would ensure that more of these items get onto the list of items that are going to be restricted from accessing foreign exchange in the Nigerian banking industry, not just from central bank source.
Emefiele also speaks on a UK court order granting a natural gas firm right to seize $9 billion in assets from Nigeria.
Since that the news about the judgment broke out late on Friday, we've been discussing with our counsel, and our counsels have advised that there are sufficient and indeed sufficient and strong grounds on the basis of which we could file a stay of execution and also an appeal against that judgment. There are certain anomalies in the process leading to the award of that contract, which is being looked at, which is currently being looked into by the EFCC, and I believe that EFCC themselves have their own investigation reports about that. So we will follow through and aggressively too on ensuring that the execution of that judgment is stayed and that the appeal and that our appeal succeeds at any level.
Since placing a ban on the importation of rice in 2015, Nigeria has saved over $21 million and provided thousands of job opportunities. President Buhari says the implementation of this new directive will not just bring about food security, but will also conserve Nigeria's foreign reserve. Fidele Aguncha, TV360, Abuja.
Meanwhile, concerned Nigerians across sectors have begun reacting to the presidential directive on forex ban for food imports. In this next report, Adeshewa Odushoga finds out what they say could be the possible impacts of the ban.
For a country that has spent over 40 trillion naira on food importation in the past 2 decades, one would have expected a warmer reception to President Muhammadu Buhari's directive to restrict sales of forex to importers of food. But the reverse seems to be the case. While experts believe that the policy is right, they say it is coming at the wrong time.
Technically, if you ban the allocation of foreign currency for the importation of anything, including food items, that we can immediately substitute with local production, then that's great, because it means you create more employment, you keep your foreign currency, so your reserve is more, and that way you're able to defend your local currency in terms of the exchange rate against devaluation. All this is good on paper, but the reality is that if you make decisions that are not evidence-based, it doesn't matter how well intentioned they are, they're going to be counterproductive.
Most of the food items that we consume, we can't produce in Nigeria. And beyond us not being able to produce in Nigeria, we have, even if we can produce, we don't have the logistics infrastructure to effectively and in a cost-effective manner to transport those goods. Access to market is not good. We don't even have a food reserve as a country. So if you look at the global hunger index, Nigeria is not one of the top performers. So a lot of the indicators show that we are not ready.
Barely a month after the president agreed to sign the Africa Free Trade Agreement, this policy may be considered divergent, as it may hinder inter-Africa deals, which is arguably low compared to other continents.
Globally, amongst all the regions globally, intra-Africa trade at about 16-17% is the lowest. And being the lowest, the goal of African economies is to trade more with each other and make sure that we are able to improve our share of global trade. So if with this policy, if it is now more expensive for Nigerians to buy what they really need, because we really need it. If we can't produce it locally and we don't have the infrastructure to do it, the message is not clear.
After it exceeded inflation since the last 42 months, with this directive, there are fears that the investors may seek alternatives from parallel markets, which is rather expensive, giving rise to food inflation.
If we cannot immediately replace the $6 billion importation of food items with local production, we are going to immediately raise up the price of food items. That will lead to food inflation. Now, bear in mind also that food items, unless strictly and narrowly defined, means also that some items that you import that form raw materials and semi-products into production of other products would also be affected.
One immediate impact for investors is that as a business, what you see is you can't really determine the source of the dollar that you are buying in the parallel market. And if that is the case, if there are certain types of foreign investors that you interact with as a business, and they will not want any exposure to anything that is not legitimate.
As much as the agricultural sector is a major employer of labor, it has suffered many years of neglect with dependence on oil. But since assuming office in 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari is taking giant steps to diversify the economy by restricting forest sales for the importation of food items like rice and other consumables. Adeshawa Odushoga, TV360, Lagos.
The Nigeria-Malaysia Business Council has set up a special trade corridor for companies from both countries to collaborate with a view to adding quality to the nation's gross domestic product (GDP). High Commissioner Malaysian Embassy in Nigeria, Gloria Taiwet, announced this while declaring open a business meeting session in Abuja. She charged the companies to maximize the vast economic opportunities in both Nigeria and Malaysia to deepen the bilateral economic ties between the two countries.
Your oil production per day is 2.53 million barrels. Malaysia is 650,000 barrels. So it is significant to inform because, there's a great opportunity for both countries to look into partnership or business venture. So I would like to encourage more Nigerian companies to engage and collaborate with Malaysian companies in a win-win joint ventures and partnership, which will boost and further strengthen bilateral trade relations between both of our countries.
The most important thing for us actually is to start and sustain the relationship. Is to start and sustain the relationship. Is to start and have mutual respect in terms of the country's need, and then a win-win situation whereby we are not dependent, and at the same time we begin to make known our value of who we are.
The first phase to the whole thing is to encourage greater level of connection, relationship between both countries. If you look at the bilateral trade figures as it stands, and even the investment numbers, there is a lot of potential for more to happen. But for more to happen, you need to have more people-to-people relationship and connectivity. That, I think, is what we are hoping to take place with this sort of programs.
We'll be taking a look at activities on the stock market after this break. Trading at the NSE closed negative today despite the fact that the market received a boost on Monday. Reversing all the gains from previous session, market indicators fell by 0.21% to 27,058 basis points. Investors also saw the value of their investments decline by about 58 billion naira as the market capitalization of all listed equities stood at 3.186 trillion naira. And at the close of trading, the volume of shares transacted went from over 250 million to 209.620 million shares, and all that were exchanged in 3,753 deals, summing up to 3.236 billion naira. The most losses were incurred by the stocks of MTN Nigeria, unable to keep up with the pace it opened the market with yesterday. From selling for 138.7 naira in previous session, we see that today the shares of MTN Nigeria dropped to 132 naira and 6 kobo. It is followed by corn oil with a decline of 85 kobo in share price value. Also, we see that PZ lost 5 kobo, and NCR Nigeria PLC also shared 3 kobo to close at 5 naira and 5 kobo. And Nestle fortunately made a rebound today, turning around to lead the pack of gainers today. Trailing is Nestle, of course, and we see trailing Nestle, I beg your pardon, is Dangote Cement. Also, we see that Berger Paints and UACN recorded significant gains to close at 7 naira 5 kobo and 5 naira and 25 kobo respectively. And moving on to the foreign scene, we see that FTSE equities, generally equities across Europe were lower amid political uncertainty. We see that FTSE actually reversed gains as Italian political crisis mounts on the heels of Prime Minister Conte's resignation. And the Dow Jones is also down, but Nikkei stayed above for the third straight day amid signs of a slight easing of trade tensions that's between the United States and China, of course. That's it on Stock Market Review. It's back to you, Fidelia.
Thank you so much, Oyin, for that update. To the foreign scene, Cameroonian authorities detained and tortured more than 100 prisoners, including suspected members of the country's Anglophone separatist movement after a jail riot last month. Now, this is according to Human Rights Watch. According to the rights group, the prisoners were taken to a military detention facilities the morning after rioting broke out in the central prison in the capital Yaoundé on July 22nd. Citing interviews with 14 detainees and several lawyers, Human Rights Watch says the prisoners were held incommunicado, beaten and interrogated at gunpoint. Many of those held were suspected Anglophone rebels whose movement has declared a separate state for English-speaking rebels in the majority Francophone country. Nearly 2,000 people have been killed in violence between separatist and security forces in the Anglophone region since October 2017. And in sports, Onitsha is ready to host the first international marathon event in southeast Nigeria. Promoters of Onitsha City Marathon announced this during a press conference at the National Stadium in Lagos. The marathon event, which will hold on the 5th of October 2019, is projected to welcome over 20,000 runners.
I think we want to have it on record as the first this media edition to be excellent one. And our target is to have our gold plate before the third edition. That's our target. And I know by this first one, you also confirm that we are set to make great records in Africa. This is the first time that, number one, the grade one measure, Nursery Wilmson, will be the one to measure the route. And we have the certification before the maiden edition. So, and again, from what we have received, we discovered that we have a course of 4 kilometers uninterrupted straight route for marathoners. Every marathoners will be glad to be part of Onitsha City Marathon.
And it's a wrap on News Now. Many thanks for watching. Bye for now.